forward. Okay. Just make sure it's recording. Right, we are recording. My fear was that we would find out. All right,
Okay,
we should be all set.
all right, good. Well, welcome. My name is Bradley Flem. I'm the director of the Office of Sustainability here at Westchester University. And I'm very glad to welcome those of you who are here in person with us today in Psych Student Union, and those of us who are joining via Zoom. We're very happy to be sponsoring today's talk, which is one of a dozen talks throughout the semester. We co-sponsor this series with the Office for Research and Sponsored Programs and our colleagues in the Sustainability Council's Scholarly and Creative Activities Committee. Today, we're excited to welcome to campus Dr. Stephen Hughes. He's a professor of biology and the director of the Aquaculture Research and Education Laboratory at Cheyney University. Please join me in welcoming him.
Thank you all very much. First of all, let me lay down a set of ground rules, okay? I am not one of those people that you can't interrupt me. If you interrupt me, if you have questions, if you have everything, I am more than excited about the fact that you have questions. So please do not hesitate to wing up a hand or hey you or whatever the case may be, and let's answer those questions as they come up. Okay. What the presentation today is, it's an overview. It's a 5,000-foot overview of what goes on with sustainability in aquaculture. We're not really talking about the processes, we're talking more about the philosophies. And so it's a little bit different for a lot of people in terms of the fact that not a lot of people hear about aquaculture, they don't see it very often, or they don't experience it very often. And we're very well blessed in that we've had the Aquaculture Research and Education Laboratory over at Cheyney University. We just celebrated earlier this year our 20th anniversary of being in business. So it's been a unique thing in that we've been able to provide this service to the community, to our professionals, and to the students of the region. So with that being said, let me get on with what we're talking about. So, as we titled it, sustainable aquaculture and mentoring youth. Why do we relate the two? The two are related very distinctly because number one, most people don't understand aquaculture, so we need to get them to understand it. But number two, it is an integral part of how we're going to move forward in terms of how do we feed the world? How do we feed urban communities? How do we make it so that we have a well-supplied, well-raised source of protein that we can use for a variety of purposes? So with that being said, I hate to, we've always got to do some definitions before we start a talk. And just so we're all on the same page. And if this is something that all of you have seen 400 times, I apologize. If you haven't seen it 400 times, you should apologize because we need to know these things, okay? According to the 1990 Food and Agriculture Trade Act, which is one of the things that is driving sustainability from USDA side of the coin. What is sustainability going to do? It will meet human needs for food now and far into the future. Stop looking at today only. We have to look at where we're going. Okay. It integrates plant and animal production. We're going back to Mother Nature. Mother Nature did not just give us plants, did not just give us animals, she gave us both together. So somehow or another, we need to start looking at it that way and realizing that, you know what, that's a system that works. And after 100 million years of research, I think she's got it down pretty darn well, okay? We rely as much as possible on natural processes and cycles, okay? Are designed to specifically that's an interesting sentence, whatever that was supposed to say, the biological, social, and economic conditions of specific places. These things are site specific. And that's the thing, that's the other thing. It goes almost like, you guys are students and some of the people out here are also students, but you always get into that thing of, oh, how do you study? And they tell you one way to study. It doesn't work for everybody. One form of sustainable aquaculture does not work for everyone. I just left a meeting in Hawaii and they were talking a great deal about bringing back a lot of their original processes of raising fish and shellfish in the region. And how that's going to impact their community as well as impact their consumption of food. So we have to look at it that one size does not fit all. We provide a livable income for the farm family. This is the other thing that people lose. It's a wonderful thing to talk about, oh, let's do this, let's do that, whatever it is. But if people can't make a living doing it, it's gonna get lost real quick, okay? So we protect natural resources, critical. We can't keep going on and on and on thinking that Mother Nature's gonna keep making up for our mistakes. We need to learn and we need to realize that, you know what, I did this wrong 7 times. Let's not do it wrong an 8th time. Let's try and figure it out. And enhance the quality of life for farmers and for society as a whole. Everybody should benefit from this. That's what sustainability is about. And that's the way it's supposed to work. Everybody wins, okay? So that's what we're talking about. What's aquaculture? For those of you who are not familiar with it, it's a nice little breakup of word aqua and culture. But anyhow, the farming of aquatic organisms, including fish, mollusks, crustaceans, and aquatic plants. A lot of people lose the aquatic plants on this deal. And farming implies some sort of intervention in the rearing process to enhance production, such as regular stocking, feeding, protection from predators, etc. These are all part of our agricultural system, and aquaculture is just a component of agriculture. So it's no different than in that concept than raising chickens or earthworms or something else as we go along. And individual or corporate, it also implies individual or corporate ownership of the stock being cultivated, the planning, development, and operation of aquaculture systems, sites, facilities, and practices, and the production and transport of that final product. We've got to get all those things entailed in there. All of it has to be embodied. No different. If any of you have ridden up and down the highway, and whether you like what Purdue or Tyson does or not, it's irrelevant. But if you've ridden down the highway, you've seen that truck full of chickens going right alongside of you. Some way you have to get those chickens from that chicken house to the processing plant, from the processing plant to your plate. You have to plan those things from day one, not at the end. One of the greatest disasters that I've seen, and unfortunately I've seen it several times during my career, are people who go out and say, oh, I'm going to start an aquaculture business. And they go out and they raise these fish. And one particular operation down in Maryland had 6,000 pounds of tilapia ready to go to market and nowhere for them to go. If you want to figure out how to not make money real quickly, walk into a commodities dealer and tell them, I've got 6,000 pounds of fish that need to be out of here today. But I need you to think about buying them. You are going to get some ridiculously low price because they have you. Because if I don't buy your fish, they're just going to sit there. They're going to continue to take up money, space, time, and you'll be back in a week and I'll give you 10 cents a pound less. These are the things that happen. So you have to plan this from day one so that you're on board with it. Aquaculture and aquaponics, what's the difference about it? So many of us think about it as the one side. Okay, we see the plate. We go to the store, we look at it, oh, look, there's a pretty fillet on ice. That's wonderful. And it says farm raised, whatever it was. Okay, that's fine. How did it get here? What did it take to make this a good product for us to do this with? And, that's a tilapia fillet right there. It's real pretty. I mean, somebody, the chef did a beautiful job with that. This is what it looked like about 12 hours before that, because literally that was our fish that went on. So myself with one of my former students, and it's, what does it look like when it's there? And how do you know the difference? One of the huge problems that we have now is that you go to a marketplace and do you really know what you're buying? Two of the biggest areas that we have huge market problems with are grouper. Wonderful fish, very tasty, very expensive. People will cheat you left and right, and they will tell you they're selling you grouper and they're not. Another one is catfish. Catfish, everybody says catfish, oh, it came from Mississippi. No, it didn't. Some of it came from Asia. Some of it came from North Africa. And those that came from Asia and North Africa are not the same fish. What are you buying? You gotta know where the product goes. So what are aquaculture and aquaponics? We already defined aquaculture. Aquaponics is a little bit of a twist on that theme. In that instead of just growing the animal, we're growing the animal and plants in the same system. And thereby we're making it a closed system, more akin to what nature did originally. If you go out here, you look in a pond, what happens? The fish are there, the fish eat, the fish poop. The plants absorb the poop, absorb the nutrients from the waste products. The plants grow, they clean the water by removing the waste products. The fish are happy, the plants are happy, everybody's happy. We do the same thing with aquaponics, except we do it in a closed system in some sort of environment. And to keep in mind, aquaponics is not something new. We have evidence that aquaponics was being done anywhere from 3,000 to 5,000 years ago in Egypt and in China. So it's not a new thought, even though there are a lot of people out here, consultants and stuff, that'll make you think that it is just a brand new thing that we did, and we're gonna sell it to you just for that reason, because you're gonna be at the cutting edge. New technologies, yes, being implied with it, but more importantly, the concept has been here for a long time and should be used. There's a need to explain the differences and similarities. Well, we already talked about aquaculture, water, culture of something in water, versus aquarium culture. Aquarium culture is aquaculture. Okay, so if you run over to PetSmart or the Pets Plus and you buy a little 10-gallon, well, even worse, you go out and buy one of the little things with the little betta fish in it. Technically, that's aquaculture. You have an animal you're culturing. So it can go anywhere from that. The picture on the other side, those ponds are down on the delta of Mississippi and are averaging somewhere in the neighborhood of about 2.5 to 3 acres. So it's a little bit of a difference in scale when we do things. 10-gallon aquarium, 3 acres, a little bit of a difference. Aquaponics versus hydroponics, often confused also. Aquaponics, we're raising fish and we're raising animals and plants together. Hydroponics, we're coming up with some form of nutrient mix and we're just raising plants. Is there anything wrong with that? No. It's just a little bit of a different way of doing the same thing. Okay. Once again, range of sizes. A lot of things, a lot of the aquaponics facilities now are being built into greenhouses. We have a 10,000 square foot greenhouse on our campus that was built in 2006. Yeah. It houses a private company that the original owner and myself sort of wiggled this deal into the campus, and it's been going along for all this time. They grow basil, and the fish that support the system belong to the aquaculture research lab. So right now we're working with koi as our fish. And like I said, they're growing basil. How much basil? Just to give you a perspective of what we can do. In their greenhouse, they are putting out over 900 dozen. Yeah, take the 900 multiplied by 12. I'm not that good at math. You guys do it. 900 dozen plants per week, 52 weeks a year. We don't stop. Okay, Christmas holidays, we're in there, we're harvesting basil, etc. And what is that? What is that comparable? 10,000 square foot is a quarter of an acre. Within that quarter of an acre, one of our crops is the equivalent of what you would raise on 3 acres of terrestrial farmland. Second difference, we're going to get 13 crops out of that this year. You'd be lucky if you get 2 crops of basil out of that 1 year on that land in this region. So we can see that aquaponics, aquaculture, one of the biggest things that it does is it steps up the production scale. It gives us more with less. And that's really a big deal. And like, for example, this facility that we're talking about here, very little. Yeah, I'll leave it at very little effluent. It's not like we flush out 5,000 gallons a day. No, probably that facility uses up maybe a couple hundred gallons a day. Most of it being in makeup water that from evaporation and stuff. We keep the greenhouse at above 78 degrees all year long. So, you know, we evaporate some stuff, but we float the basil on these little rafts and everything goes along quite well. We can just pull them out. Also, if you shop around here, if you go to Giant, Wegmans, not so much, I'm not sure, Acme has somebody's product in there, I don't think it's ours anymore. Yeah, I think it's, but, you know, then there are a bunch of other places that I found out these guys are selling to too that I didn't know about. But if you go over there, if you walk in the produce area, you'll find the basil, it's in a plastic sleeve with a little bit of water in the bottom, the roots are still on, and I'll be on it and say Urban Farms, HERBAN Farms. And if you look on the back, there's a little Cheyney logo on there, it says they did it on our campus. This is their only site where they grow right. So different things that happen that way. But aquaculture also involves aquariums, as we said, but also involves the bigger aquariums. If you've been across the Delaware over to Camden, over to Camden, over to the Adventure Aquarium in Camden, that is an aquaculture facility. If you've been to Disney World, you've been to the Living Seas, it is an overgrown aquaculture facility. And what do we grow? Anything from guppies to killer whales. It doesn't matter, it's still aquaculture. You guys are awfully quiet. You're starting to bother. Okay. Why is aquaculture important? Where does it take us? Okay, in 2018, a little bit old, that old data, but it still works. World aquaculture fish production, and this is just fish, reached 18.1 million tons. And remember, when you do tons with two N's and ES on the end of it, that's metric. So basically, if you were to convert that into more of an English ton, you're talking about more like 164, because it's 2,000 pounds in a ton, basically. So, you know, a tremendous amount. That's world aquaculture, 32.4 million tons of aquatic algae. Algae is a huge product worldwide. Not as much here, we're working on it, we're trying to do more, but it's not as much here. 26,000 tons of ornamental seashells and pearls, yes, that's still aquaculture. And bringing the total aquaculture production to an all-time high of 114.5 million tons, which is really not a bad number. But that number has done nothing but grow since then. And where does it grow to? Well, why? Little graph stolen from the FAO publications. If you look at the blue part of that graph, that is wild caught fisheries. Okay, that is what we can get from the oceans, from the lakes, from the rivers, as far as wild caught fish. You'll notice one nice thing. Since about 1980, we are flat out level. We're done. We have basically harvested the natural resource to the maximum that we're going to get out. We can come up with a few little tweaks and tweaks, but not very much. If we're going to continue to improve, the red is aquaculture production. So what we have done is we have met the additional needs of the world through aquaculture. Because the natural system won't work right now. We can't tell everybody stop putting people on the planet. And if we put more people on the planet, we have to feed them. How are we feeding? We're feeding them this way. Some just per capita seafood consumption between 1980 and 2021 in the United States, it went up from 17.7 kilograms per person to 22.4, about a 27% increase. People keep telling you, eat fish, it's healthy. Talk about that another day. No, I tell my students all the time, one of my favorite expressions that I love in all life, figures don't lie, but liars figure. And you have to know what you're saying when you say it. And in a political season like we are now, please understand what these people are saying, because they don't. Okay,
Question.
sure.
It says seafood consumption, does this data include freshwater fish, the tilapia, the
The other thing
catfish?
It's the other thing that drives you nuts, is that, is that I work in this area, so I get picky with it, nobody else does. Seafood, basically, if you brought in a fish, if you went out here to the Brandywine and brought in a brook trout, it's gonna be included in this figure. I'm sitting there going, that's not seafood, that's freshwater fish, and it's like, but we don't care. It's like, okay. We do what we do. So all of that's freshwater, saltwater, brackish water, all that we can get, lobsters included in that number. Notice we didn't put numbers on there because the lobster, the number way up, but it's all good. For the world, but look at the world, more so than just us. 11.7 kilograms back in 1980, it's jumped up to 20 kilograms per person. Okay, 71% increase in seafood consumption. Why? Well, number one, people said it's healthy. Number two, I can't raise enough cows and chickens and this. I gotta go eat something else. So guess where we've been going? Going to aquaculture and seafood. So it's a huge push to do more with aquaculture, because these numbers are not going to slow down. They're only going to increase. And so how do we get that food to these people? So the future, based on this dynamic performance over the last 30 years, and with fairly stable catches from capture fisheries, it is likely that the future growth of fishery sector will come mainly from aquaculture. I'm just stating the obvious. The difficulty is getting people to understand what it is that they're doing and how it contributes to the sustainable nature of the planet. If I go out, that capture, but drop back for a couple of minutes. If I look at this is, and I look at that number for how much we're gaining in capture fisheries. This is without destroying the fishery. Okay, this is saying we're taking as much as can be replaced. And so it's the sustainable level of that. Can we go out there and grab more? We can grab a whole bunch more fish, and it has been done multiple times. Back in the early 80s, we crashed. Are many of you familiar with striped bass as a food fish and everything, capture fish, whatever? We crashed the Atlantic striped bass fishery back in the early 80s. Why? Too many people, too much capture, not enough reproduction. And we put in, and Fish and Wildlife Service, USDA, a bunch of organizations, NOAA, all put in a concerted effort through the 80s and 90s to rebuild that fishery. And we succeed. It's one of those success stories we can sit there and say, yay, we did it. But you don't want to do it again. It takes a lot, and it takes a very focused effort.
So Dr. Hughes,
Yes.
so, yeah, I had a question. I wanted to go back to that very point that's level there. And you said that does reflect sustainable capture fishery, because my understanding, well, cod crashed in 92. It seems like there's a whole succession of
This succession of crashes
going
and
for
rebuilds.
different species. Does that not reflect
I will
going after different species after populations?
I will go through something, and I will say this, and unfortunately it's on tape. Okay, when you look at numbers like this, the most important thing that, remember what I said, figures don't lie, but liars figure. Okay, this is not somebody trying to lie, but they are. These numbers are from FAO, from NOAA, from whoever you want it, you'll get a similar set of numbers from anybody. The problem with these numbers is this is reported catch. Do you think, he asked the class, that everything that people catch, they report? Okay, good. I spent 10 years on the Eastern Shore of Maryland. And I do not want to tell you how much. Anybody like blue crabs? Ah, okay. I don't even want to tell you how much of the blue crab catch is not reported. Maryland DNR knows it. They can't prove it, but they know it. And they put catch limits on and say you can only bring in 5 bushels per day. Got it. 5 bushels per day. That is what you will see when I get to the dock. You will see 5 bushels on my boat. Where are the rest of them? Don't ask that question. Because there are a number of different answers and they figured out ways around it. So where these fisheries are a lot of times and why they crash sometimes, we sit there and we say, well, we've got limits. We've figured out the population equations for this, and you should be able to pull X number of million pounds of this out, and we should be replacing it every year. Why is this fishery crashing? You got the idea. Just gonna leave it right there. And this is what you need to be aware of when you look at everything. Everything is done this way. So when you're harvesting natural resources, there's always some wiggle room in there. Some of it is wiggle room just because, gee, how many tons of pine trees did you harvest this year? My scale was off. I didn't mean for it to be off, but it was off. So we missed a few tons. Okay. You know. But it's not intentional. So there are some things that are done as accident, and there are some things that are done intentionally. You know, the proverbial, yes, I went to the butcher and he's got his thumb on the scale. Yeah, you got 3 pounds of meat there. Don't worry about it. It's all gonna be, you know, it's something that we all have to account for. Cod fisheries have crashed. We're watching, as you said, a series of crash and burns. And then we come through and we make a big deal out of it, and then we try to rebuild it, and we rebuild that fishery. But while we're rebuilding this one, we're not looking at the one that's over here behind us that they figured out that, oh, well, if you don't want me to harvest cod, I'll go harvest flounder. And then we wonder why the flounder fishery is crashing. Well, we weren't monitoring it. One of my former students had a job, and you know, it's a big deal on a lot of these fishing boats that you have monitors on the boat. You have people who go out and their job is to make sure that you're reporting the numbers correctly. I'll be honest with you, I feared for that young lady's life every time she went out. She would not have been the first one. She never did, thank God. She has a different career now. She's moved on to other things that are much safer. But she would not have been the first one that, got tangled in one of the lines and she went overboard. And we couldn't get her back in time. Things happen. Yeah, no, don't say you're sorry.
Could you go back to the graph?
Sure. Maybe,
No.
but I hit the right buttons.
I was wondering if the pink or I guess magenta portion of the graph is factored in the current amount of aquaculture we're doing, or if that's also assuming that we're going to ramp up.
No, well, I mean, basically, number one, you're looking at a little bit of a ramp. You see the graph ends at 2030. Well, I don't know how we got the stats for 2030 yet, but you know, that Back to the Future works real well. But
Statisticians can tell you anything they want.
yeah, but, you know, what was his name? Griff, whatever it was in Back to the Future, went forward, got the almanac and knew who was gonna win all the things. Biff, that's, you know, we may have a Biff and no, we don't know, I don't know. We know what the number is gonna be in 2030. But, you know, up to about 2022 or probably about 2022, those numbers are probably fairly accurate. As accurate as they can be.
So that's going off just assuming that they increase the amount of aquaculture we were doing, or is that just?
Absolutely. We're increasing constantly. But see, here's the other thing, you know, now we talked about the blue and talked about the bad. Here's the good, okay? We're looking at fuchsia, magenta. I don't do colors. That stuff on the top. Okay, we've got a number there, but I will guarantee you, perfect example. The numbers from my lab or from our greenhouse aren't in that number. There are 400 people in Philadelphia that have little things that they're they have a 200-gallon tank and they're raising a little, number of it. They're not in these numbers. There's a lot of stuff out here that's not in those numbers, that's additional production. So we're producing more than what we say, which is a good thing. But, we're trying to get a better handle. I'm in the process of working with some people, and we're gonna be looking at who has aquaculture facilities here in Commonwealth. We went through the older publication that Department of Ag here in Pennsylvania had, and we looked at just one county and found 6 aquaculture facilities that were not in their records. And I'm not talking about the mom and dad ones that were raising 20 pounds a week. I'm talking about somebody that was raising 1,000 pounds a month of trout. They're not on the books. Why? They told me I had to register. And a lot of it's that lack of information. Now, and let's go into rural China. Good luck. Okay, getting all those numbers right. I have my pond. I'm raising my fish. I don't tell anybody about what's in that pond. That costs me money if I do that. So you got different things. Sustainable aquaculture, the strategy, there are needs, we have needs. Like everybody else, okay? Number one, we need a recognition of the fact that farmers earn a fair reward for their farm. This is why, one of the reasons why you can't get a lot of people to do it. Everybody, one of the biggest problems that I have with you come to me today and you say, Dr. Hughes, I want to start an aquaculture facility. I want to raise a significant amount. I need to get financing for my facility. We're going to have work. Our work is going to be cut out for us. Why? Because the banks don't recognize this as a viable, profitable way of doing things. Why? Because we've had so many failures. Because so many people who went into it without their eyes being wide open and thinking, back to that example I gave you a while ago, I've got 6,000 pounds of tilapia sitting here and I have nowhere to sell them. I need to get $1.50 a pound to break even. This guy's offering me 65 cents. What's going to happen? I'm going bankrupt quickly. Okay, so we need to get to the point of getting it so the farmers are getting a fair wage, so that they're interested in doing this. To ensure that benefits and costs are shared equitably by everybody. If you are, and there are some things that work well, there's systems that work very well. Banks are willing to take risks on the poultry industry. Why? Because Purdue, Tyson, Allen have been out there for decades. If you come to them and you say, I want to raise broiler chickens, they're going to slap a book on your desk and say, this is how you're going to do it. Here's all the numbers, here's all where you're going to buy your feed, here's where you're going to get your insurance. Everything is laid out because it has been that organized an industry for that long. We're not there. Part of the reason, and I haven't gotten to that slide yet, is that it's so variable. And I'll speak more to that in a minute. So the benefits and costs are shared equity to promote wealth and job creation. This is what we're trying to do with this. We're not trying to just feed the world. Somebody needs to make a living while they're doing it. Trust me, nobody at Tyson raises broiler chickens just because I want to feed the world. No, they know they can make a buck. Okay. To make sure that there's enough food, that enough food is accessible to all. This is a major issue. Why in a country like this, that's one of the wealthiest countries in the world, why should we have people without? We shouldn't. And there are ways to get that food to them and not trash high quality food. To manage the environment for the benefit of future generations, we can't go out there and keep crashing fisheries. We can't go out there and destroy the whales and the sea turtles while we're fishing, we need to do something that gets the food on the table, but also maintains a good situation for the future generations. And to ensure that aquaculture development is orderly with both authorities and industry well organized. A lot of it is catch as catching. We don't really have that organization. And some things get caught in the net of being in multiple different organizations. So for example, if you come to me today and you say, I want to raise channel catfish, I'm going to send you to USDA. If you come to me and say, no, I'd rather raise saltwater striped bass, I'm sending you to NOAA. And if you come to me and you tell me, well, I want to raise striped bass in a freshwater system, but using river water, I may be sending you to Fish and Wildlife Service. Because of the way the regulations are written. Different things for different people. Whereas if you tell me you're gonna come raise a beef cow, I'm sending you to USDA, you're done. Okay, so we're looking at a variety of things that need to be straightened around. The ultimate application for aquaculture to develop its full potential is that communities prosper and people are healthier. One of the biggest things that we look at as a future for sustainable aquaculture is a lot of these seafront communities that used to be fishing communities, but because the fisheries have either crashed or they're maxed out, these folks need a new career. They're used to working with fish. They're used to doing the process. They have all these skills. Let's apply it in a different way. Let's make it a little bit more sustainable. So communities prosper, and there are more opportunities for improved livelihoods with an increased income and better nutrition. Fish are healthy. They are a good protein source. Farmers and women are empowered. Yes, I took the time to step out and actually hit a little bit of the diversity issue. And if you really want me to hit the diversity issue, I'll also go into the minority communities, but we'll not do that today. That's another long talk. But anyhow, you know, that we've got groups that have just been left out. And they really have skills, and they should be acknowledged for that. Here's the one I was talking about. What's the big problem? We have over 580 aquatic species are currently being farmed all over the world. If I tell you to go farm a beef cow, the odds are it's going to be an Angus or a Jersey. And we know a lot about doing it, but how many of you have farmed a barramundi? Yeah, but they're coming, but they're, you know, it's just so many options that we never really know everything about any one of them. Aquaculture is practiced by both some of the poorest farmers in developing countries and by multinational companies. And I do mean multinational companies, large ones. And eating fish is part of the cultural tradition of many people. And in terms of health benefits, it has an excellent nutritional profile. The lipids are good, the protein is high. It's not something that we sit there and look at that is going to give you a heart attack tomorrow. Okay. 80% of current aquaculture production is derived from animals low in the food chain, such as herbivorous and omnivorous fish and mollusks. So not all of them are the carnivores. So we don't necessarily have to use high levels of protein in the feeds. We can do things with lower levels. And also recycling and reusing resources. One of the biggest projects we're working on right now is looking at I'm working with some people, we're looking at a project where what's going to happen out here in Lancaster County is that they're going to take, this one is, we're working with a hog farm. So we're taking a hog farm, we're taking all the waste from the hog farm, we're putting it into biodigesters. They're taking out heat and methane to do a variety of other things energy wise. But the dry product that's at the end of the run is a fairly high protein level and a fairly decent nutritional profile. And now we're going to look at working that back into an aquaponic system to raise fish and plants to sort of complete the cycle coming back around. And the plants, if we want them to be, we can feed them back to the hogs, whatever the case may be. So ways of taking these things and closing the loop. But enhancing circularity in these things. And so 80% of these animals are in that ballpark that we can do these kind of things. And we also need to get out of a little bit of our mentality of, one of the biggest arguments we have is, why do you feed fish to fish? If we look at a lot of the trout and salmon diets, they have a fair amount of fish meal in. And they're like, why are you feeding fish to fish? Well, number one, these fish are used to eating fish. So it's a natural concept to them. But the argument is, well, you could have taken the fish meal and fed people with that. Keep in mind, despite what science, diet, and the other advertisements will tell you, animals do not eat a particular protein. They eat for amino acid requirement. And if you supply that amino acid requirement, they really don't care as much where it came from as people want to believe. So we can feed trout with soybean or cottonseed meal or some other things. There are some tweaks and twaps that we have to work out in there. It's not a perfect fit because some other things may be a little off. But once again, learning and moving forward, learning and being sustainable. So, constraints, a lot of this growth is going to be urban. We don't, we're losing farmland left and right. Fine, I can do in a quarter of an acre. The running joke on our basil farm, urban farms. The owner named it that for two reasons. Number one, basil is an herb, so HERB, great. The second thing was, the way that thing is designed, we can take it downtown, set it right next to City Hall in Philadelphia, and it should work just as well there as it does here. So it's an urban thing. So we're gonna see a lot of stuff growing in urban areas. But what's the constraints? Limited water resources. Any of you who've ever lived there, lived in a city, know the water, even if it does taste good, and even if it doesn't have 3 million chemicals in it, it costs you an arm and a leg. And so you can't really just throw it at a system. You gotta make it work. Limited space. I gave you the example earlier. We're doing in a quarter of an acre what it would take you 3 acres to do. So we're doing things like that. We need a high return on the dollars invested. Why? Land is expensive in the city. But perfect example, like I said, 13 crops of basil at roughly $2-something a plant. It works out fairly well. You can raise more expensive plants. Realistically speaking, in aquaponics, more often it's the plants that are the money, not more so than the fish, because you're gonna raise so many more plants than fish. There's a need to control the environment. If I've got a heat or I've got a cool, that's expensive. So once again, go back to that need for a high return on my product. If you're teaching in this area, need to recognize who comprises your student base. Most of the kids in urban schools aren't used to a natural background. They didn't grow up on a farm, or they didn't do this. So we're back to teaching them. One of the things that blew me away the first time, and unfortunately I keep running into it. I'm down on Maryland, I'm on the Eastern Shore. I'm less than a mile away from the Chesapeake Bay. And I'm sitting there in front of a bunch of 5th graders talking about aquaculture. And we started talking, I said, where does a hamburger come from? The store? Okay, where does the meat that's in the store come from? They were lost. It took a while to get it out of it then the next thing went to, it came from a pig. But it's hamburger. No, not that. They don't understand where their food comes from. We stopped teaching our children where the food comes from. They don't know. So we've got to get that back. Now you get that back. Now you're starting to worry. Now you start to be concerned about, how do I grow it? When do I grow it? How do I harvest it? What does it matter? Okay. So we really have to understand who the students are. And some of these students are 55 years old, by the way. I've got several students, quote unquote, that are learning from me, that are trying to start their own aquaculture facilities as a retirement project. Have you ever grown fish? No. I had a goldfish when I was a kid. Okay, that's a start. We'll go from there. whatever the case may be. So these are the things you're worried about. You gotta look at it from a whole perspective. Sustainability is not just sitting here and saying very nicely, we want to save the world. How do you save it? How do you teach people how to save it? How do you make it important to those people that they do save it? It's a big deal. What do we hope by doing this? Our friends over there. Nemo, well, no, what's his name? I got it. Nemo's dad. Just lost his name. Marlon and Dory. I don't want to tell you how many phone calls I got after that movie came out. Oh, I saw this movie about fish. Can we talk about doing something with it? Yeah, sure. You need to get it back, but what it did is it created an ooh-ah factor. Everybody went to see the movie, like, wow, look at those fish. Wow, can we do something with that? We need to get back to that. Get back to that ooh-ah factor. Try to reestablish that man-nature connection and reestablish a connection to agriculture. So that we're actually worried about what we do and how we do it. Practical understanding of basic knowledge. This stuff goes through math, science, social science, consumer and business skills, management, marketing, all development of responsibility and caring for animals. All this comes from aquaculture. I've got a bunch of second graders that are raising fish in their classroom because the teacher understands this, and she's using it to teach them. Let's keep doing it. At that point, I want to stop running off at the mouth. I do it well, but my students are like, oh God, thank you. But anyhow, but if there are any other questions, I would love to answer them if I can. But I just want to say thank you very much for your time today and for your patience with me. And hopefully something that was said means something for you.
It is 10 to 1, and some of you may have a class at 1 that you need to leave for right now. Can you stay?
I can stay for a little bit longer.
So if you can stay for questions and answers, please do, but if you have to go, that's all right. Excuse yourself quietly, and that goes for those of you on Zoom as well. But questions and answers.
Yes.
Yeah, great talk, Dr. Hughes. I was wondering, do you have to use supplemental lighting for those 13 crops throughout the year, like any different times?
Yeah, we do. It definitely pushes the envelope a lot faster.
Yeah.
When we first built that greenhouse, we didn't. And what we're finding is the biggest difference is the amount we're producing. When we started, we have not changed the footprint on that greenhouse. But in 2006 and 2007, we were coming out of there with about maybe 400 dozen plants at the end of a week. By adding supplemental lighting, we're getting the plants to grow a little bit faster, do this, do that, and mostly we're using LEDs now. And now we've moved that up to 900 and something, and we've also figured out every which way to squeeze every little inch out of that system, that we can get another plant in there, because it works well, and it does a good thing there.
Thanks.
So,
Nobody behind you.
that was fast. So in your recent visit to Hawaii, what did you learn about traditional Hawaiian aquaculture practices and anything that you could apply here?
There's not a lot that's applicable here, because a lot of what they're doing is, it's sort of to a degree a capture fishery, is that they're coastal. And so there are periods of time when they can get the fish to come in to their containment areas, and then they can fence them off. And they keep them in there for that period of time and then feed them, grow them faster. And then at some point in time, it's like, okay, we'll harvest you, you will keep around for brood stock next time. So, but what it comes down to, now I'll tell you, there is one thing that did come out, and that should make me think about it. And it goes back to an old thing that's with me. I fully believe in teaching people how to take care of themselves and feed themselves. I do have a big problem when you teach them how to feed themselves with something that's not what they normally eat. And my point there is things like the Peace Corps and everything else. tilapia is the poster child for the Peace Corps and everybody else. And literally tilapia now exists on all 7 continents. Yeah, even in the Antarctic facilities, they've actually got some fish swimming around. My argument has always been tilapia is a wonderful little cichlid. It's from Africa and the Middle East and da, da, da. But when you come into Central America and South America, there is another equivalent group of cichlids that exists there already, that these people have been eating for eons. And they're not that hard to raise. Ask the aquarium people, because we've been raiding those rivers and ponds since, that's how I got into this mess, was, doing things with aquarium fish. And it's like, why don't we teach them how to raise those? No, we got this book on tilapia, we can do this. I really think that's the biggest thing. That's one of the things they were pushing, is we want to get back to what is our history, our culture. And I think that's a huge thing to do with people. I'm not gonna get people in Portland, Maine to go hot to trot over channel catfish. It's probably not gonna happen, okay? But you know what? But if I'm working with somebody, and after Helene, there's gonna be a lot of somebodies, along the Appalachian Trail, I could probably get them to be very interested. Look at who you're working with. Look at what they're doing, what makes it work for them. And stop trying to reinvent the wheel. Like I said, 580 species. We don't have time to reinvent the wheel every 6 months. We need to figure out what to do with those 580 species. Because most of them are just simply, oh, they're in aquaculture. Yes, it's like the Hawaiian thing I said. We brought them in, we caught them, and they sit in like milkfish culture for decades. Has been bring them in, throw some stuff in the water that'll grow the phytoplankton more, because they're plankton feeders, and they'll eat and they'll grow and they'll do anything. Do you really know what you do? Can you grow them faster? Never tried. We've been doing this for hundreds of years. It works. Okay. But try and find a way to help them with their milkfish. Don't come in with tilapia. I love tilapia. We have tilapia in mind. I love them dearly. But I also love them on plate. But anyhow, that's probably one of the biggest things that the whole this is the American Fisheries Society's 154th annual meeting. And one of the biggest thrusts in that meeting was meeting the needs of indigenous peoples. And they were really focused on it because they put it out in the middle of nowhere called Hawaii. And no one was really spending a lot of time thinking about what's going on in the Pacific Rim and what's going on in those islands, and how do we help these people do what they need to do, except for build another hotel. So that was a very long answer to a very short question.
So thanks.
Thank you for the question on Zoom too. Let me open this up so we can see.
Or Cheryl.
Yeah, Cheryl, you can go ahead and ask your question. Let me make it so we can see everyone.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's always me. It's always me, isn't it? But I'd like to pick up on a couple of things that you mentioned, because frankly, I'm obsessed with seaweed. And so speaking of something that isn't in the American culture, right? Like seaweed and algae you had touched on earlier. I mean, I'm interested in its like climate capacities for, sequestering carbon while also being a food source, although they kind of can't cancel each other out. So can you just tell us a little bit about what's being done with the plants, especially seaweed and algae?
Seaweed and algae, both coasts. Okay, first of all, let's make that perfectly clear. Both coasts are very interesting. In this region, it seems to have become more of a New England kind of thing, more so than this far south. Down here, algae is more like verboten. We don't want to talk about algae because it usually clogs up the Delaware Bay and causes fish kills and things like that. That's the way they look at it. But no, there's a lot going on with it, and there's a lot of concern about, as you brought up the sequestering carbon concept of things also. There is a lot of questions about, particularly like with aquaponics and things like that. Is it really a good thing in terms of carbon sequestration and things like that? And a lot of the current data is saying no. It's not working well for that. It's, aquatic plants are not the biggest ones for sequestering carbon that way. Because of their cycling and everything else, they have more of a tendency to put out a good chunk of carbon right along with it. But there is a significant interest along both coasts in developing a lot more. And it's going everywhere from the algae, which are being done in like photoreactors, where they've got something, a tube with some light, and they're just running 1.5 tons of CO2 through it and trying to get it to grow, all the way to the macroalgae and the kelps, where they're looking at, the 20-30 foot long plants that they're fully growing up in New England and doing well with them. And I shouldn't say it, but I will. I've been a reviewer on several grants where people have been interested in it on both coasts. And I'm seeing more and more of them, and the science is getting better. I'll be honest with you, 5 years ago, you came to me and told me you were bringing me an algae project. It was like, oh God, here we go again. Because there were usually so many holes in the project, the chance of you being successful was minimal. Well, people filled in a lot of those holes. I don't know where they got the funds to do it, but they did it. And they filled in a lot, and these projects coming up now are more focused and way more productive in terms of everything I said with sustainability. They're looking at it as being a farm product that is going to be economical, that's going to put money into these communities and into these things. And I can pair it up with my oysters or my clams and make all this stuff work together. And it's going to be a lot. It's coming, and it's coming fast. So if you want to jump in, this is a good time.
Thanks. I'll keep that in mind for retirement.
Yeah, and just don't tell your investment banker that, well, Steve Hughes told me to go invest in algae. And it's like,
Any more questions here? I know I'm a little bit curious about opportunities for small farmers. We've read a lot about pig farming and poultry farming becoming very industrialized, very consolidated. Farmers become more like employees. Is there any danger of that happening? It sounds like we're really at the beginning of aquaculture.
we have a wild mixture of it right now. There are some serious corporate players right now. That are in there, and like there is a group growing steelhead up on the Hudson River. I've looked at videos of their facility, and I want to know who their financiers are, because this is not a $500 facility. This is looking like more like about a $10 million facility. And they're in it, and they're in it for real. Worldwide, we've got a lot of companies at that level. The Atlantic salmon industry is very corporate, for example. But catfish is on that weird cusp between family-owned farms and almost being like the poultry industry that, well, Delta Pride owns these farms, or if I don't own the farms, I'm the only processor that you can bring your fish to. So there's a whole weird dynamic there. And then like around here, we have a large number, like in the Commonwealth, we have over 70 farms that I consider to be significant farms, not mom and pop things. but are significant farms. We've but over 70 to 80% of the, most of them are trout. Either rainbows, brooks, or browns. But over 70% of those fish are going right back into the rivers and ponds. They're for recreational fisheries. We don't have a very large food fish industry here in this country. We're looking at starting to develop that a lot more. The Department of Ag here in the Commonwealth is very interested in trying to push that because of all the possibilities. But right now, most of the people that I'm talking to are I guess the best way I can say it, sub-$1 million facilities. And you say that and you go, oh my God, $1 million. Doesn't take much to get there. That 10,000 square foot greenhouse on our campus right now, which I consider relatively low tech, would probably cost you $1 million to build today. The greenhouse itself, because it's polycarbonate and this and that, is probably somewhere between $500,000 and $600,000. Just the greenhouse, and then you put all the bells and whistles in it, and now you've got that. So we've got a real oddball mix. I talk to people almost at least monthly. People want to do small projects. I want to do this. I want to raise something for this purpose, that purpose. I have a restaurant. I'd like to raise my own for my restaurant. Fine, there's going to be a lot of that, but right now, there's not a big corporate buyout run. The little guys are going to stay, but the thing I always try to work with people on is I'm back to that marketing. If you're going to start this business, where is the product going? Know where the product's going before you pull your MasterCard out and say, hi, Aquatic Ecosystems, I want to buy.
Yeah.
Have some idea, do that part first, and then you have some place to go.
Thank you. We're after 1 o'clock. We're gonna have to close off the Zoom room, so thanks to those of you who are still with us.
Thank you.
See you next week, and one last thank you.
See all of you again.